talk is from Carmen O'Dell and Kate, are you? Just Carmen O'Dell?
Halfway through.
Halfway through. Okay, talking about development of open access.
Hello, welcome. I'm Carmen O'Dell and that's Kate O'Neill there, and we're from the Library Research Support Unit, and our area of responsibility or even expertise within that unit is around open access. So that's supporting researchers to make their work open access and managing the processes in the background that need to happen for that to take place within the institution. So today we're going to look at all the different opportunities there are for you as researchers to both access information via open access and to make your own work more available, and available perhaps to audiences who couldn't see it in the past. And if I tell you that 3.5 years ago neither mine nor Kate's role even existed within the institution, it gives you an idea of the pace of change in the open access arena over that time period. So it's going to be a very quick run through, but please ask Kate questions at the tea break. I have to go, so she gets that particular opportunity. So I'm going to start with mandates. They're not usually considered with any great joy by academics or even librarians for that matter, but actually it could be argued that the HEFCE and the RCUK open access mandates have been responsible for the change in the open access arena of recent years. And what they have unquestionably done is made researchers put huge amounts of UK research available, made it open access to a wider audience. So that actually is pretty magnificent in my book. We're going to look at how this demand for open access from researchers is actually starting to affect publishing itself and forcing publishers to change their models, to change what they do, more reluctantly in some cases than in others. And we'll look at what that means for you in terms of how you publish, what you publish, and who you can expect to reach with your work. So hurrah for HEFCE, and I'm not being sarcastic. I'm hoping that most of you have at least an awareness of the HEFCE open access mandate, which essentially says that if you want to submit work to the next Research Excellence Framework, that you have to make your work available open access. And the model they've chosen to do that is by putting your author's accepted manuscript into a repository within 3 months of the date of acceptance. Now that has caused a certain amount of consternation when it was announced, and quite a bit of huffing and puffing from various people, including people in the library, since it was announced. But what we have to remember is that HEFCE didn't announce that policy just to annoy us or to cause stress or even distress to any individuals or organisations. Their point was that they wanted to make UK research more visible, more accessible, and ultimately more productive. And it's having an effect already. At the University of Sheffield, we've had a repository for more than 10 years. So in 2011, it had been going more than 5 years. How much of the 6,000 odd items that are estimated as the output of the university per year, how many of those papers do you think were put into a repository in 2011? Anyone? A number? Andy, go on.
10%.
How much? 10%? Is that?
I said 10%.
Yep. Andy? Any increase?
About 500.
Lower. Yeah, you'd be right. It was 230. So that's less than 5% of the university's output. Last year, in 2015, which is before HEFCE's policy even takes effect, because that started on the 1st of April this year, but when it was much talked about and people were starting to engage with open access a bit more, we had 2,300 articles put into the repository. So that's a 10-fold increase. So that's pretty good actually. So thank you HEFCE. That's 10 times as much work from the University of Sheffield that is going to have a bigger impact, a bigger audience, and hopefully result in more prestige and impact from this university. How is SHA doing in this respect? Well, actually, pretty good actually, which is just as well considering that Andy and Kate have spent a lot of time over the last few months trying to help you as a department to engage with the policy. But you can see you've got over 1,000 items in the repository already, which if you compare to 200 items from the entire university in 2011 is pretty good. It's been downloaded a lot, so you'd think you've got a few extra citations in there somewhere, and you can see it's got an international audience. So thank you, well done, keep it up. What I'm also hoping you are aware of is that before HEFCE, both RCUK and the Wellcome Institution, who are big funders of research and this department receives a lot of funding from both of these organisations, have said that if they fund your work, when you publish it, it should be made available open access, and they provide the university with funds to make it available via the Gold route, which is where you pay the publishers to publish your work and they make it available open access on the journal website so anybody can download it straight away. And if you are funded by any of the bodies listed up there, you should be doing this. You should have done it for the last couple of years, and if it applies to you, then please get in touch with us via the email, check our web pages to see what it is you need to do to make this happen. So, open access journals. The point of an open access journal is that when the article is published on the journal website, anybody can download the full text of that article without any restriction. They don't need to pay any fees, there are no barriers, no passwords. They have open access to the article itself. Now, the problem is the majority of journals that you will choose to publish in, or that you actually want to read, are not open access. They require a subscription fee, which is normally paid by institutions on behalf of their affiliated authors. Now, some publishers now, well, the majority of publishers now will allow individual authors to make their own articles open access by paying a fee. But because more and more people are requesting open access, even some of the big publishers, the likes of Elsevier and Nature, have made some of their journals transform from being a subscription journal to a fully open access journal. So these titles here, Nature Communications, Nucleic Acids Research, that's from Oxford University Press, that happened in 2005, and the last 4 titles are all from Elsevier. These were subscription journals, and based on the requests of the editors and all the authors who published in them, they have transformed them to fully open access journals. It is fair to say that the big publishers, the traditional publishers, are not that pleased about open access, and they are doing it somewhat reluctantly. So although there's a few titles that have flipped to open access, the vast majority aren't. You can see other open access journals on the link I've provided here, and you'll get the presentation afterwards, but on the whole those tend to be more niche journals, so they might be national journals or very specific subject journals. They're not from the big publishers. Kate will talk a little bit more about how, as academics and as editors, particularly on board, you can affect a change and actually nudge some publishers from just tweaking their model to actually transforming it. So some publishers who've already done that are listed here. So PLOS, back in 2001, launched their flagship journal, PLOS One, and that was interesting because it was a fully open access journal, it was a multidisciplinary journal, and it published all sound science. So it didn't have to be novel, it didn't have to have a particular impact on the field, it just had to have the research done to produce that report had to be sound. And I can remember when it first came out that there was a lot of scepticism within the science faculty. I was the science faculty librarian at the time, about publishing in there. They didn't really see the relevance of it and didn't think it would be that important. However, it had several advantages. It was a brand new model. They used all the new technologies to produce the articles, so they could do it a lot faster than the other journals. Because it was open, it meant that everybody could read those articles. So the net result of that was that in a very short time, it had built up a very respectable citation score, and so people did want to submit to it. So actually Sheffield authors within a very short time were as busy submitting to this journal as to all the other journals in their sort of favourites. And what I particularly like about PLOS is that open access journals, it's not free to produce a journal, so they have to cover their costs somehow and generate some level of profit. So they do it usually by charging authors something called an article processing charge. But what PLOS says is if you cannot, as an author, pay our charges, we will waive them. And they do. I know of researchers who have come to me and said, I've got no funding, what can I do? They've submitted to PLOS, and PLOS have said, fine, and they've published it anyway. F1000 is another new publisher, and their model is interesting because they use something called open peer review. Again, they're multidisciplinary, they are published very quickly, and what they do is when you submit to their journal, they quickly appraise it, do a very quick appraisal to make sure it's not complete nonsense. Then they pre-publish it on their website and they allocate it to reviewers who, as they review, once they've got their review, they put that up there on the web alongside the article. There are author can then respond to that. That response goes onto the website, and it's a developing dialogue. And then once it's been reviewed by 2 people, and it's passed their review process, it's considered to be published, and at that point readers can also engage with the article, and that dialogue can be up there as well. Cogent OA comes from Taylor and Francis. It's a sort of platform of theirs where they're saying that it's an author-centred journal, and they're trying to make use of all sorts of social media tools to make it very interconnected between the authors themselves, to build a community with the researchers. But what's interesting from our point of view is that they're saying it's open access, and they're using a pay-as-you-can model. Now, it's not quite clear when you look at their website what that actually means, and nobody has yet published with them that I'm aware of. But please have a look at that and see how you get on, and let us know if you do have success with them, because it's certainly an interesting take on it. And finally, there's SCOAP 3, which is another level of collaboration, really, and this is where institutes that do a lot of high-energy physics research nominated their top high-energy physics journals, physics journals are some of the most expensive out there in the market. And they went to the publishers and said, right, this group of institutions, we guarantee you to keep giving you the equivalent of our total subscriptions that we pay every year. And in return, you make all these journals open access, and that authors can publish in them without paying any APC charges. So they're free to read, and they're free for authors to publish in, and we will pay for that as a sort of group. And the benefits for the organisations, obviously, is that it means that they can get their work to the widest possible audience without penalising their authors who want to publish and haven't potentially got funding to pay any charges. But from the publisher's point of view, they're not any worse off than they would be, because they're still getting the same level of income. It's a great idea. It actually took an awfully long time to get off the ground. It was about 7 years. It is up and running now, and hopefully the lessons that were learned from that process can perhaps be applied to other disciplines where that might be a working model. I'm now going to pass it on to Kate to tell you how you can actually go beyond just what the publishers allow you to do.
Hey, so what I'm going to talk about is basically moving beyond traditional publishing and trying to break the mould, basically. So there are several academics, some at the institution here, some from other UK institutions, who have decided to do things differently. So Alistair Ray, who's in Urban Studies and Planning, is an editor on Regional Studies and Regional Science, and he and his fellow members of the editorial board went to the publisher, Taylor and Francis, and said, we want our journal to be fully gold open access. And they said yes, eventually. It took a while, and there was quite a lot of negotiation, but they got there. They said, we believe this is important. Martin Paul Eve is an academic at Birkbeck University, and he works in the humanities and social sciences, and he was particularly concerned about the lack of funding that arts and social sciences can get. And so that particularly impacts on, do they have money to pay article processing charges? So he, along with a few colleagues, have set up the Open Library of Humanities, and they currently have, it's 8 journals, and they also support several other ones. They're all fully open access journals with no cost to the authors to publish there, and the way it's paid for is libraries pay a small amount to join. We paid, I think it was under £2,000, which is less than what we would normally pay for an average article processing charge for a journal. And that's free for anyone to access, so you can go to those journals. They're attracting existing journals who want to change. They want to leave their current publisher, the editorial board, they want to go and work with them. So they're attracting new journals all the time, and it's a really interesting model to look at. Paul Ginsberg. Does anyone know who Paul Ginsberg is? Mike? No? I thought you might have been one of the people that would know. Who's heard of Archive? It's a massive online repository of preprints in lots of science and engineering disciplines. And he was the guy who said, we're emailing lots and lots of files between ourselves, all these papers, there's got to be a better way of sharing them. And so he set up Archive, and Archive currently has over 1 million papers in there that are free to people to access. Lingua to Glossa, this is a fairly new development, and Lingua is an Elsevier journal. And again, the editorial board said, we're not happy with what we're getting. We want our journal to be fully open access. We want the people to have to pay no more than €400 to publish gold open access. And Elsevier said no. So what the editorial board did was they all got together and collectively agreed that they would leave. So they've taken their expertise and they've set up a new journal, Blosser, which is published through this Open Library of Humanities. So again, there's no charging for authors, there's no charge for anyone to read it. And what they're trying to prove is that Elsevier doesn't matter. The name of the journal doesn't matter. What makes that journal impressive is the editorial board. It's the people who publish there. It's the people who peer review. And the majority of them have all said, we're having nothing to do with Lingua anymore. We are all about Blosser. So it's saying we're not going to be tied into an impact factor. And there's also things you can do at a smaller level. So Adam Glenn, who is a postdoc in materials science here at Sheffield, is currently on a one-man mission in his department to change their attitudes towards publishing. And what he's doing is setting up a dialogue within people within his departments. He raises it whenever he can. When there's an option to publish an article, he's the one that says, we should be thinking about open access and this is why. So, and this is a little quote from him, which is, the internet is open by design and academic publications open only if you pay publishers £22.6 million a year. That's a lot of potential science funding going into the pockets of publishers. That 22.6 million is what RC UK gave to institutions last year to pay article processing charges. So that's money that goes directly into publishers' pockets. And there's also things you can do if you're not publishing an article. We don't have to focus just on articles, it doesn't have to just be conference proceedings. So RIO, there's quite a few links here so you can just click through and have a look later at your leisure. RIO is a new journal which will publish anything to do with the research process. So you can put in your grant proposals. You can then say whether they were actually funded or not. And so it gives you an opportunity as academics to look at what other people have asked for funding for, was it successful, what's going on in your area. You can publish negative findings, you can publish your data there if you wish. Basically anything to do with your research can go in there. There are data repositories where you can put your data, and Jez will be talking about that in more detail later, just looks up in the corner. Monographs. So particularly, again, not some relevant here maybe, but in some disciplines, if you're mainly publishing monographs, if you want to publish them open access, they cost a lot of money to publish them open access. So there are different ways of doing it, and UCL have their university press, and they're currently offering a waiver to people who want to publish monographs. Sort of waving your little slide at me, Andy. Knowledge Unlatched is another way of publishing monographs open access. Again, I won't talk about that because I'm running out of time. Posters and presentations, you can put them on F1000, you could put them in Figshare. There's a number of places you can put it. And also, we at White Rose have our own university press. And as Andy mentioned, Michael Fake will be talking about that in the next session in more detail. But if you want to set up your own journal, your own conference proceedings, textbooks, get your students to do it, you can do that. You don't have to look at what's out there and accept what you're given. You can set up your own, and we will support you to do that. So this is not for you to tell me now, but I would like you to think about what we can do at the library to actually support you in making your work open access. Because right now there's a lot of, we're telling you what's out there and it may not fit what you're thinking and what you want. We will do whatever we can to support you, but we need to know what you're interested in and how we can help. So please do let us know. And by us, I mean me, really. Carmen's leaving. And then a final thought, there's just a lovely quote from an academic in psychology that I really, really like. If policymakers, healthcare practitioners, the public, scholars in other parts of the world who might not have access, if now all of a sudden they do have access because you've put that article up in the repository, the possibilities that can come from that are endless. Anything could happen. And it's true, when you put your work out there, you don't know who's going to do what with it, who's going to be inspired, who will look at it and go, this is the breakthrough I've been waiting for that I can build my research on. But if your research is behind a paywall, then you're already limiting what can happen. So put it out there and see what happens. Thank you very much.